Hello and welcome to another webisode of Android Dev 101. Today, not a regular episode, but a webisode. We're going to be exploring web applications in Android. So we're going to start off our tutorial today by also showing how to import projects into your Eclipse Android environment. So we have here the zip of our two projects we're going to show today, already extracted. Once they've been extracted to their project folders, we're going to right click in our package explorer and click import. In the import menus, we're going to go to Android, existing Android code into workspace. Now we're going to select the folder where the projects are stored. And you see when we click OK, it already shows us the two projects we would like to import. We click finish, and the two projects are imported. If you saw for a second there was a red X over the WebGap, that was because I hadn't finished compiling everything and grabbing all the resources. And now that it has, it's showing that there's no errors in either. So let's get started with our web view face activity. Now this application is going to have one simple activity which is going to create an Android web view in order to create a web application. Now our goal for both these projects is to create web applications that can access the native code in Android. So if we go to our resources for this project and we open up our layout, we'll see our very simple activity layout, which contains a web view, and that's it. Just a relative layout with a web view inside. Now all of the important coding for this application is going to be done either in our web assets. So let's take a look at those real quick. So we have an assets folder which comes with Android, and we create a www folder. We're keeping our web assets. We only have one file for this project, our index.html. And you see it's a pretty simple example. We're going to have a simple text at the top that's going to say what the example is, and then a button which will activate some JavaScript. Now if you're not familiar with JavaScript, don't worry about that for this tutorial. For those of you that are familiar, you might notice that we're calling an object called toaster, which you don't see anywhere in the HTML or JavaScript code. Now the reason for that we're going to see when we get to our native code. So when we jump into our native Java code for this activity, see again very short, in our onCreate we're going to grab that web view, and we're going to load a URL which is located again in the assets folder and a www folder, index.html. Now obviously you can load something that's locally loaded with the APK, or something else you stored on the Android device, or even something that's not local and have it access something through the internet to that web view. We're also going to grab the settings and turn on JavaScript, and then we're going to create an object called toaster and add a JavaScript interface. Now this is what allows us to bridge from the web code into the native code. Now if you see, this toaster object is very simple. We're just going to get a context on its initialization so that we can later on command, when a function is called showToast, we're going to make a toast and show it. And if we jump back to our JavaScript code, we'll see that is the function that we call showToast, and we give it the string toasted. Okay, so very simple code. Let's run it real quick and see what it does. Okay, we have it installed on our emulator. Let's jump over to that. And if we click in, we see the application running. Again, a simple title and then a button. And when we click the button, we see it to place a toast on the screen. So again, we're calling from our JavaScript web app a native function in Android that we created through our interface, our add Java interface, and that was just a simple Java object, and we can create whatever functions we want for that JavaScript interface. So that was our first example. Now let's jump into our second example. Now our second example is going to be using a framework called PhoneGap. PhoneGap is a very fully functional framework for using web applications with native capabilities on many different platforms. If you see from their web portal for developers, we have iOS, Android, Windows Phone, BlackBerry, and many more. And they're constantly adding and updating. They push out a new version about once a month. This example we're going to be using 2.7, which just recently launched. Now we have the example fully loaded already, but let's just take a quick preview of what we have. So you see there's an assets folder with a www in PhoneGap. This is created by default when you run their command line application builder. And inside we have our another index.html, I shouldn't say same index.html, and a JavaScript file. Now the JavaScript file contains all the code from PhoneGap, also known as Cordova project, and that was automatically generated as well. And our index.html, again, simple example, we have a simple title and a button which calls a JavaScript function. Now you notice in this example it's going to call an exec function on a object called Cordova. Now this is the object that's given to us to call native code, and if you see, it's also a little more complex than our simple web view example. When this function is called, we give it a few parameters. We give it a function which is a callback function for when the native code has been executed successfully, another callback function for when the native code has failed to execute successfully, the name of the plugin, the name of the function, and a list of parameters. So again, more complex. This is a full functioning framework allowing you to build very complex web applications. Now let's take a look at our native code that we're going to have connected to this JavaScript. So first let's take a look at our WebGap. I would say activity, but if you see, it actually extends from DroidGap. DroidGap is the Java class that they've created for you to run your PhoneGap activities through. Now by creating something that extends DroidGap, you're going to receive all of the PhoneGap capabilities. You also have the ability to create PhoneGap fragments and lots of other different interesting things. You see, this is what is generated again from their command line application creator. You can see all the details for that on their website. We're going to have some links in the description for this video, and it will create for you a fully functioning application, and then you just have to go in and edit the parts you want to change. And so you see it already created for us the URL loader that we need with the URL that it grabs from another default configuration, which is going to point to our assets folder. Now let's take a look at our plugin, because as you see here, there's nothing connected to the plugin that we're calling from our JavaScript. If we open our plugin class, you'll see it extends Cordova plugin, again another class that they have created through their framework. And in our plugin we come to an execute function. Now if we jump back to the JavaScript for a second, you'll see that we call Cordova exec. Anything that's called to Cordova exec with the correct parameters is going to arrive at the exec function. So you see, we're going to have to parse ourselves and see which exec they want to run. So we call an if clarification, if its toast is equal to the action that's sent to us. In this case, that's what we're sending. See, toast function or action. They call it an action. Then we can't just call the toast straight. If you see, we have to get the UI thread. Why? Because these callbacks are not running on the UI thread. That was obviously a very important decision they had to make in the framework, because they probably didn't want a lot of the activities to slow down the UI. So we simply, in order to call the UI thread to call our toast, we have an object called Cordova in any Cordova plugin. We can grab the activity and grab the UI thread and then create a simple runnable and call our toasts. So again, let's run this in our emulator. Okay, it's installing, and there we see it's loading a little bit slowly in our emulator, but hopefully finally pulling it up. Okay, and you see the title's a little different because we changed our title for the PhoneGap to say PhoneGap so we can tell the difference. And the button, when we click it, same functionality, and we call a toast on the screen. So again, two different ways, two completely different projects, and a way that we can create dynamic web apps that can actually call functions from our native code and access different things from native Android Java code. So thank you for joining us today with Android Dev 101. We're going to have a lot of the links in the description for you to create these kind of projects and a zip file for both these projects so you can get started to play around with it.